Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is the Nightblade Tank build for the Markarth DLC, and might turn out to be a bit of a longer video because this is my main tanking character in the game, and I've got heaps of skills leveled, and I'll tell you all about what they do and what you can bring to the group. So there will be timestamps in the description if you want to skip over the optional skills that I'm running, even though it would be good to know. If you are serious about Nightblade tanking, you can always do that and make it a little bit shorter for yourself. Okay, we'll start out with the character sheet. Quickly buff up. We've got almost 19k maximum magicka, we've got almost 41k max health, and almost 24k max stamina, which is a huge pool. Our magicka recovery is super with 2300, and our resistances just fell off to 24k, but as long as you keep your buffs up, they will always be around the 30k mark, and 33k is the cap for that, so we're always close to cap anyway. As you can see, it's only important that you keep your buffs up at all times. We've got 64 points into health, running the Atronach Mundus Stone for increased magicka recovery, and as food we're running the Bewitched Sugar Skulls, which give us health, stamina, and magicka, plus health recovery. And then for potions, we are running the Essence of Health, which give us health, magicka, and stamina, or just the Crown Tri restoration potions if you have a bunch of those left, because they do exactly the same thing as the Tripod's Essence of Health. Okay, let's get right into the skills. First thing we've got is Defensive Stance. This comes from the One Hand and Shield skill line. Starts out as Defensive Posture, you can morph it to Defensive Stance, and then what this does is it basically just gives you a damage shield of almost 13k for 6 seconds, scales off your max health, and you reflect the next harmful direct damage projectile cast at you, which can occur once per cast. The main reason I love having this on my front bar is because while having a shield equipped, the amount of damage we can block is increased by 10%, and the cost of blocking is reduced by 10%. So this just gives you a bit of leeway in terms of resources and the incoming damage, plus the damage you can block and the cost of your blocking. It's very nice to have on your front bar. It's my preferred shield. Yeah, this is why we're running this on the front bar. Next up from the Shadow skill line comes Dark Cloak. This is our heal over time. Shroud yourself in Protective Shadow to heal for almost 3k every 1 second over 8 seconds. Also scales off of max health. The other effect you get here is Minor Protection for 8 seconds, which is the duration of Dark Cloak, reducing your damage taken by 5%. So another really nice sort of damage negotiation buff for ourselves here. And then also in the passives, which we'll get into later, but it's important to mention now, casting a Shadow ability grants you Major Resolve for 6 seconds, increasing your physical and spell resistance by almost 6k. The duration is increased by 25% for each piece of heavy armor equipped. We've got 175% bonus here, so we do get a 16 seconds duration. And this is because on my Nightblade I prefer running 7 pieces of heavy armor for more resistance and health in general. However, you can also run 5-1-1, but we'll get into that later. So Shadow, the Dark Cloak, does not only heal you over time, it's our main heal pretty much. It also gives you Major Resolve, increasing all of your resistances, which means you want to keep this up at least every 16 seconds, because that's how long Major Resolves last, but preferably even faster, because you sort of want to constantly have your heal over time on. Next up from the Assassination skill line is Mirage. This starts out as Blur, and this will grant you Major Evasion and Minor Resolve, reducing your damage done from area attacks by 20% and increasing your physical and spell resistance further by another almost 3k for 26 seconds. So this is your resistance buffs on the front bar here. You get Minor Protection, you get Major Evasion, and you get Minor Resolve and Major Resolve from these two skills, which means you always want to have both of these up, and then that will push your resistances up to the 30k mark. Next up from the Sword and Board skill line is our 2 random skills that are pretty much a tank's bread and butter. You got Heroic Slash and Pierce Armor. Heroic Slash will deal physical damage and for 12 seconds afflict enemies with minor maim, reducing their damage done by 5%. And then you will also gain Minor Heroism, granting you 1 ultimate every 1.5 seconds for 12 seconds. So every 12 seconds you want to reapply Heroic Slash to always get more ultimate back and have minor maim on the target, reducing their damage done to you. And then Pierce Armor, this has been changed a little bit. This is your main taunt. It deals physical damage and taunts an enemy towards you for 15 seconds, so you don't ever want to let that run out, because the enemies will go berserk and attack your group members. That's your job as a tank. You want to have them taunted. And the change here is, whereas before it only used to inflict them with Major Breach, reducing their physical and spell resistance by 5,948, it now, this morph, also gives you Minor Breach, and will reduce their physical and spell resistance for another 2,974. So you've got close to 9k physical and spell resistance reduction on the boss with the Pierce Armor morph, so it's definitely the preferred morph for tanks, this patch. And it makes it a lot easier on your DPS, because in magicka groups, for example, people wouldn't have to put anything into the spell penetration in their champion points, and they could go full damage with this one. And it's also very nice, obviously, for stamina groups, because those stamina DPS, they do need a bit more support with the reducing the physical and spell resistance of the bosses. It just looks like this, in case you're new to tanking. Let me find a target. You stab the enemy, and then you can see the little red flames over his head, and also the little shield underneath its name that's running out and ticking down. This is your taunt. As long as the flames are there and that shield thingy is there, the enemy is taunted towards you and will only attack you. And don't ever let that run out, because it's your job as a tank to keep your group safe. As an ultimate on the front bar, we're running Reviving Barrier. This is a damage ward for you and your nearby group members, which will absorb up to almost 19k damage for 30 seconds, and the ward will also heal you and your group members for almost 10k over 15 seconds. So it's a very nice damage negotiation skill. It comes from the support skill line, so you'll have to play some PvP for that, but it's really worth it because it's a very strong ultimate to protect your group. And also with the Magicka 8 passive, just for having it slotted, you gain an extra 10% Magicka recovery on your front bar, so you can use your skills more often and get your Magicka back quicker. Alright, back bar. First off, from the Destruction Staff skill line, I'm using a Lightning Staff here. You can also run an Ice Staff, I'll get into that later though. This is Elemental Blockade. It's dealing magic damage, and it also has the chance to set an enemy concussed and off balance, which makes them take more damage from your whole group. So the way this goes, this patch, is you pretty much need 2 people with lightning staves that can put blockade down to make sure you have a nice uptime on the concussed / off balance. And yeah, so if you have 2 healers in your group that are already running lightning staves, you could swap this out for an ice staff, obviously, which would give you a nice little shield that has been added with this patch to protect you from spell projectiles. And then also, which would give you the frost blockade, and that could immobilize chilled enemies and keep them in place as well. However, I've set this tank up for mostly stamina groups, since this seems to be the meta right now, but we'll get into that later when we talk about the gear. Both is fine. You can use ice staves or lightning staves, it doesn't really matter, just whichever one you can pick up or you can get to drop. And then, as I said before, in a trials group you'll want 2 people with lightning staves at least, and then if the off tank and the healers are all running lightning staves, you could easily swap this out to a ice or frost staff. Okay, next up is Silver Leash. This is from the Fighters Guild skill line, the first thing you unlock, and it starts out as Silver Bolts, morph it to Silver Leash. And what this does is you use this to pull enemies in. So if you're taunting a boss or a big thing over here and an enemy comes up over there, you can just use your Silver Leash and pull him over. Obviously it does not work right now because this is a target dummy, not an enemy, but the enemy, if he's not CC immune, would be pulled towards you, and then people could focus him down with AoE damage next to the boss. Next thing we've got from the Siphoning skill line is another heal and resource management skill. This is Leeching Strikes. Starts out as Siphoning Strikes. You can morph it to Leeching Strikes. And what this does is it will cost your light and heavy attacks to heal you for 1684 health and restore 106 stamina for 20 seconds. And then when it runs out, so you don't want to reapply it early, just let it run out, because when it does, you restore up to another additional 4,270 stamina based on the length the leeching strikes was active. So this is one that you should only reapply after it's run out, pretty much, to always get these 4,200 stamina back. And your light and heavy attacks will heal you and restore some resources. Obviously, fully charged heavy attacks will restore twice the value. Next up is our crowd control skill. This is from the Shadow skill tree. Starts out as Aspect of Terror, morph it to Mass Hysteria, and what this does is it will cause up to 6 enemies to cower in fear for 5 seconds. So you use this if you're surrounded by enemies, and all of them will be immobilized and not able to attack because they're cowering in fear for 5 seconds, which makes it a lot easier for your team to focus them down because they won't fight back for the amount of time. So this is pretty much your crowd control skill. You run into a dungeon or a trial and you've got a group of enemies approaching you, and you just fear them all in place, and it'll be really easy for your team to kill them all before they can even fight back. Next up is our range taunt, because we want a taunt on both of our bars. Sometimes you get stuck on one bar and you have to taunt anyway. So this comes from the Undaunted skill line. Starts out as Inner Fire, morph it to Inner Rage, and this will deal magic damage and also taunt the enemy towards you for 15 seconds, plus a ranged ally targeting the taunted enemy can activate the Radiate synergy, dealing magic damage and obviously restoring resources for themselves if they have the Undaunted passives, which we'll get into later. Pretty easy, just works from range, target something and use Inner Fire. And then as you can see, the enemy does have the flames over the head again, which means he's taunted to only attack you and no one else in your team for 15 seconds as well. Last thing we've got on our back bar is Aggressive Warhorn. Aggressive Horn from the Assault skill line. It starts out as Warhorn. You level this by participating in Cyrodiil battles or going into battlegrounds. And what this does is it will increase your group's max magicka and stamina by 10% for 30 seconds, so it gives everybody a bit more resources. And then also you and your allies gain Major Force, increasing your critical damage by 20% for 10 seconds. So very important. It's a really nice damage boost to your group if everybody's critical damage is increased by 20% for 10 seconds. That is pretty much what we're using this for. Okay, let's quickly get into optional skills. I'll try to make this as quick as possible. In-cap Strike is more for off-tanking. That's a damage dealing ultimate, sort of. It's pretty cheap, and if you cast with 120 or more ultimate, the enemy is stunned. Plus, which is probably why people would run it on a tank anyway, is while slotted you gain Reeve, which restores 100 magic and stamina when you deal damage with a light or heavy attack on an enemy with a negative effect on them, which bosses will most likely have. So this plays well with the leeching strikes, which also causes your light and heavy attacks to restore stamina and health. However, it's not really necessary for the build we're running, because we are on an Imperial, which I'll get into later as well, and we get resources back anyway. Lotus Fan is a nice skill to use. This one can be used as a gap closer, because you will sort of teleport towards an enemy, and also enemies hit with it are afflicted with minor vulnerability for 10 seconds, increasing their damage taken by 5%. So if your group is lacking minor vulnerability, you could use this to apply it. Plus, what I mean with gap closer is this. You sort of teleport towards an enemy really fast. And this can be very helpful in places like Cloudrest or Halls of Fabrication, when the big boss, the last one, knocks you back and you want to get back close to him really fast to avoid the wipe mechanic jump. So this is a nice skill to have as well. Piercing Mark is Major Breach, which you already do with your taunt Pierce Armor. Minor Breach and Major Breach even, but this is Major Breach, the almost 6k physical and spell reduction from a range. So you could use Piercing Mark from a range, for example, if you're range taunting the Ice Dragon and Sunspire, and then put that on them, and they're still afflicted with Major Breach even though you're not close enough to stab them. It's a nice skill to have as well. Relentless Focus has kind of sort of lost its meaning a little bit since they changed it with the last patch, so it's not too important. In the Shadow skill line, Bolstering Darkness is a very nice ultimate. If you don't have barrier unlocked yet, definitely go for that one, because this puts a circle on the ground and everybody inside of it, all your allies and yourself, will gain major protection while inside the ring and even after leaving it. And it will also offer a synergy to your group, where group members can heal themselves for 16, almost 17k health over 4 seconds, which is pretty much a full life of a DPS, so that's very nice as well. Refreshing Path is also a very nice skill that I sometimes use if I don't need Silver Leash in places like Cloud Rest, where you don't really have any enemies to leash in or chain in. What this does is it's a healing field that you put in front of you, but it also gives you a speed boost. So you do this, and then you get a speed boost, and you can run to the next place that Samaja teleports really fast. So also very good skill to have. Darkshade is a shadow spirit that you summon for 20 seconds. It deals magic damage, and people usually use it on tanks because it does inflict minor maim, reducing the enemy's damage done by 5%. So pretty much the same as Heroic Slash does. However, as said before, if you were to taunt something from range and you can't really be close enough to slash it or stab it, you could use Piercing Mark and Darkshade for the minor maim in place of Heroic Slash. Siphoning. We've got Soul Siphon here. The only reason to use this ultimate is probably to give your allies the major vitality, increasing their healing received by 16%. So this is a huge buff to the healing received in execute phases where there's a lot of incoming damage. You could be the one to use Soul Siphon and make it easier on your healers, because your whole team will get that increased healing received of 16% per 4 seconds. So it's a very niche use ultimate, but it's nice to have if you're serious about Nightblade tanking anyway. Funnel Health is pretty much another healing ability. You do a bit of damage and heal yourself for 56% of the damage done. Debilitate is a minor magic steal ability. Usually healers do that with Elemental Drain anyway, but in case no one's running it or you're in a dungeon and people need it, you could use that for that. And then Power Extraction. This has been changed as well. This now applies minor cowardice to an enemy, and for 10 seconds it will reduce their weapon and spell damage by 215, and you also gain major brutality, which is not too important because as a tank you're not doing much damage anyway. However, the minor cowardice is a nice buff, so if you wanted to weaken the enemy's damage output a little bit, you could use Power Extraction for that. In the one-hand and shield skill line, Spell Wall is obviously very nice because this is just allowing you to block for 7 seconds without actually blocking. So you will block every attack that's incoming for 7 seconds, and you can use that time to do some heavy attacks, get some stamina back, or reapply any of your buffs if you wanted to. Defensive stance is on our build anyway. And then Shielded Assault is a nice gap closer as well. It just works like this. You sort of smash toward an enemy and bash them, but it's not really necessary, to be honest, because if we wanted a gap closer, we already have Lotus Fan, which I like better, plus it also gives the minor vulnerability. On the Destro staff, Crushing Shock is a nice range interrupt if you were the one that had to interrupt a certain boss, like in Asylum Sanctorium, the poison boss, or in Hel Ra, the Flame Shapers. You could use that on your back bar where your destruction staff is. And then other than that, we have Immovable here, which makes you very bulky, because for each piece of heavy armor, the amount of damage you can block is increased by 5%, and you're also granted immunity to knockback effects and major resolve. However, this will keep you in place. You won't really be able to move once you activated it, so I've not really seen people use that much anymore, except for maybe in Veteran Sunspire or so, if there's a lot of damage incoming. You've got Turn Evil here in the Fighters Guild, which can be nice. It puts a rune down on the ground that grants everybody around you minor protection and endurance, reducing the damage taken and increasing their stamina recovery. And then we've got the whole Undaunted skill line. Obviously, Overflowing Altar is an awesome skill on a tank, especially if you're running in dungeons without a healer, because this will put minor lifesteal to all the enemies, and that means if your team attacks them and damages them, they will actually heal themselves every 1 second just for doing damage, which is their job anyway. They can also use the Blood Feast synergy, healing themselves for 65% of their max health. So that's a very nice skill to have too. Shadow Silk is more of a niche skill. Inner Rage obviously is our far taunt. Bone Surge is another shield. I do prefer defensive stance, but you can also use Bone Surge if you wanted to. This will give a synergy to an enemy, which will put a damage shield on them and also grant them major vitality. So that's another source of major vitality. And if you're with your group, they can activate the synergy that is on you, sort of, and grab a damage shield from this as well. So it's a bit nicer for group protection. And then Mystic Orb obviously is a synergy you can throw out to your group. It's an orb that will float over the room and deal magic damage, and people that activate its synergy will do more magic damage, because I think it scales off of their max magicka value, not of yours, and also restore about 4k magicka or stamina. So this is nice if you wanted to give a synergy to your group. In the Assault skill line, we've got Resolving Vigor, which is a heal that is very nice, but it costs stamina, so you want to be aware of that. It can be nice for certain sets though that require you to run Assault skills. Same with Razor Caltrops. This is also a very nice skill. This will create a 8-meter radius area of effect field in which enemies take damage, and it will reduce their movement speed by 50%. And also, while it's ticking, it will afflict them with Major Breach in a area of effect thing. So not just one person, Major Breach, but all the people in here, all the enemies will be afflicted with Major Breach. Nice skill to have anyway. And then Proximity Detonation, which pretty much turns you into a living bomb. And after 8 seconds, you will deal damage to all of these targets. In the support skill line, Efficient Purge is one thing you want to have, because this will cleanse yourself and your group, removing up to 3 negative effects. It's very good for trials like Halls of Fabrication, for example. And then Mystic Guard allows you to create a life bond between you and an allied player. While bonded, 30% of the damage they take is transferred to you, and they also gain minor vitality, increasing their healing received, you and the ally, by 8%. Alright, so much for that. That was the optional skills that are good to have on a Nightblade Tank. I know it's a lot. Thanks for sticking with me. We'll get right into the passives as soon as I sorted my bars again. Here we go. Okay, Assassination. Obviously this is the DPS skill line, so increases your physical and spell penetration against enemies you are flanking. Hardly ever doing that as a tank, because most of the time when you taunt them you can't really flank them, since they turn around towards you and you'll be in their face. This is very nice though. This got changed as well. When an enemy dies within 2 seconds of being damaged to you, by you, you restore 1000 magic and stamina. So you just put your elemental blockade down, you have damaged enemies, and then your DPS kill them and they die, and you restore all these resources. 1000 is quite a lot, so very good passive. Increases your weapon and spell critical rating. Is not too important, however it's nice for us because we also have the Hemorrhage, which means dealing critical damage grants you and your group minor savagery, increasing the weapon critical rating. So this is very nice for stamina DPS groups. If you do crit with your light attacks or with your heroic slash or even pierce armor or anything, you will grant your whole group minor savagery, increasing the weapon critical rating by 1314 for 20 seconds. So it's a nice thing to have. Shadow increases your health, stamina, and magicka recovery by 15%. That's just free recovery on all 3 values, so very nice. We've already talked about this. It gives you major resolve. Dark Vigor increases your max health randomly for having a shadow ability slotted, so we've got 3% on both bars. And then Dark Veil increases the duration of your non-invisibility based shadow abilities by 2 seconds, which is also very nice for our Dark Cloak. Catalyst. After drinking a potion you gain 20 ultimate. Very, very good for a tank, because we can pump out more war horns if we have more ultimate. Increasing our max magicka by 8% while a siphoning ability is slotted. So we've got a little bit more magicka on a back bar for having leeching strikes slotted, which is nice because blockade is an expensive skill, so is mass hysteria, and we've got a bit more resources in that term on the back bar then. And then transfer. Casting a siphoning ability while in combat generates 2 ultimates, so every time you reapply your leeching strikes every 21 seconds or so, you do get an extra 2 ultimate, which is also very nice. Obviously you want all of the passives from the one hand and shield skill line, since this is your main front bar weapon, and from the destruction staff skill line, since this is your main back bar weapon. About the ice staff passives now, fully charged ice heavy attacks do no longer taunt. They will only grant you a damage shield, which is nice. So DPS who accidentally run ice staves because they might be new to the game now no longer can taunt enemies off of you. For this now they have Destructive Clench, which is the morph of Destructive Touch, that now says Frost Clench also immobilizes and taunts enemies. So if you were running a Frost Staff on the back bar, you could use Frost Clench, meaning Destructive Clench, in place of Inner Rage if you wanted to, and just use that as a range taunt. However, the range of Inner Rage is 28 meters, and the Destructive Clench one is 15 meters, so it's pretty much personal preference, whether you wanted that new taunt skill from the Frost Clench or Inner Rage, as long as you have one of the far taunts on your back bar. Alright, I've got nothing in light and medium armor. It is an option. You can run 5 pieces heavy, 1 medium and 1 light if you wanted to. In that case, you'd want the first 3 here, because the last 2 are only for if you have 5 or more pieces of light armor, and in medium armor you only want Windwalker for your stamina recovery and athletics for your movement speed. However, since I run 7 heavy, I have nothing in there. I've got all of the heavy ones, obviously, because that is our main 5-piece body set. Fighter's Guild, you only want Intimidating Presence because it reduces the cost of your stamina abilities by 15%, so it makes your Silver Leash cheaper. And then Banish the Wicked to generate ultimate when you kill Undead, Dead, or Werewolf. Undaunted, you want all of these because you will get a little bonus to your max health, stamina, and magicka for each type of heavy armor worn, so that's 2% since we're 7 heavy. And then activating a synergy will restore more max health, stamina, and magicka, so those are very good. Just grab them anyway. Support, as I said, you only need the magicka 8 for increased magicka recovery if you have barrier or something like guard or purge slotted. And then medicinal use, your potions last 30% longer. This is very nice, so you can have 100% uptime on them. Alright, for the race, we are an Imperial. Why is that? Because Nightblades do get quite a lot of ultimate back, as you've just seen in the passives. There's a lot of drinking a potion, gain ultimate, or do this, gain ultimate. So the Nord, which is usually the preferred tanking race in the game, we don't really need that. Our resistances are 30k anyway, which you would get a lot from a Nord, and our ultimate regeneration is really nice also, which you also would get a lot from a Nord. Hence, on a Nightblade, I prefer Imperial, because an extra max health of 2k is very, very nice for us. An extra max stamina of 2k is very, very nice for us. And then the Red Diamond passive reduces the cost of all our abilities by 3%, plus when we deal direct damage, we heal ourselves and restore magicka and stamina. So for every light attack we do, for example, or every heroic slash or so, we can heal ourselves and restore magicka and stamina. And since heals on a Nightblade are pretty much limited to the Dark Cloak and the light attack heals from Leeching Strikes, this is a very nice thing to go with. And then also the max stamina and max health of a whole 2000, not just 1000 or so, comes in very, very handy. Plus you also get increased gold gains by 1% if you need a lot of money. So yeah, Imperial is definitely my preferred race for Nightblade tanking. However, you can definitely also run this build on a Nord or an Argonian or a Breton even. You can pretty much tank with any race, but Imperial, being an Imperial, just makes it a lot easier on yourself. Okay, let's quickly go into the gear setup. So this is the stamina version for a stamina group of the setup. On the front bar, we're running the Master's Perfected Axe and the Master's Perfected Shield. This comes from Veteran Dragonstar Arena, and what it does is it gives you an extra 3% healing taken, plus while you deal damage with Puncture, which is your taunt, Pierce Armor, the morph, you heal for almost 7k health and gain spell and physical resistance equal to the amount of healing over healing done for 5 seconds. So this is really strong. This basically means that while we have our Dark Cloak heal over time up and our Leeching Strikes little heal here and our heal from our Imperial passives, every time we taunt something, we just stab it with Pierce Armor, we get a 7k heal, so 7k, almost 7k health back. Now you need to be careful not to over taunt certain targets, because some of them get a bit pissy if you taunt them or stab them too often. But basically every time you use your taunt, you will get almost 7k health back, which is very nice. This is pretty much there for our own survival, for our own healing. It's very strong. If you don't have that, you can just go with a random 5-piece set on front and back bar, which might be better for some occasions. Let's quickly talk about the traits. Since we're an Imperial and we don't have all that ultimate gain that a Nord would have, I opted to go for Decisive here, which says when we gain ultimate we have an extra 25% chance to gain an additional ultimate, but we do have a lot of ultimate gain in our Nightblade passives anyway, so Decisive plays very well with being a Nightblade tank. And then on the enchant, I have a hardening enchant which grants me a tiny damage shield for 5 seconds. It's not a lot, but it's better than nothing. If you don't want that, you could also run poisons, for example, or you could pretty much use any glyph you like at that point, maybe a weakening one to weaken the target a little bit. But the safe route is maybe having a tiny damage shield there, but it's really your choice. The shield you want in sturdy with a tri-stack glyph on. You'll see that I'll run tri-stat on all of the big pieces in the shield in this build, which makes for the really nice stats that we had in the beginning that I showed you. So this is the first set we're running. The second one for a stamina group is still Alkosh. Stamina DPS need a bit more help with the lowering of the resistances of the bosses, so Alkosh in a stamina group still has its place. And you want that staff infused with a Crusher enchantment to reduce the target's physical and spell resistance even further, for the reasons I've just mentioned. And if it's an ice staff, you also want it infused with a Crusher enchantment. Now Alkosh, every time you take a synergy, you deal physical damage over 10 seconds, and it will reduce the physical and spell resistance of any enemy hit by the amount of the initial hit's damage done. Now that means to actually make use of Alkosh, you have to take a synergy, and obviously you have to be on the bar where Alkosh is your 5-piece. So if I've got my staff on the right bar here, I've got 5 out of 5 items, which means I can only use synergies and proc Alkosh on my back bar. Now this might be a little bit a little bit hard for some people. I've tested it out in a couple of vet dungeons and trials, and I didn't really have a lot of problems with it. I just do the normal tanking stuff on the front bar, keep my buffs up, and if I see a synergy floating by, I'll just quickly swap bars, reapply blockade, and grab the synergy to proc Alkosh, and then swap back on my front bar. However, this might not be easy for a lot of people, so if you wanted to just go with Alkosh on your front bar as well, where we now got the perfected Master Sword on board, you can just put an Alkosh shield and Alkosh weapon one-hander on this here and just have it on both bars, just like you always used to. It's fine. You miss out on the heal from taunting, but that's pretty much just an extra buff for you, so you can also just go front bar Alkosh. It's not a problem if taking synergies only on your back bar is a bit too much to handle. So staff and infused with a Crusher enchantment, and then the jewelry for Nightblade Tank, I prefer Triune, which will give me magicka, stamina and health on all the pieces, so that makes for about 1400-ish or 1300 general health, stamina and magicka that I get on all 3 values, on all 3 resources, with magicka recovery glyphs. That's important, the magicka recovery glyphs. The traits on the jewelry are pretty much your personal preference. You could go with infused and 2 triune, or you could go with 1 triune and 2 healthy if you wanted a bit more health. Just play around with it, or sort of, you can do the maths on it. So the purple triunes will give you about 400 of each, as you can see here. If you wanted to go with 2 healthy, for example, you would lose out on 800 stamina and magicka, but you would gain about 900 health times 2, so 1800 health. That's really just your personal preference, what you feel comfortable with. I do like my triune, so that's what I'm running. And then our buddy set is Yolnakrins from Sunspire. This is probably the best main tank set in the game right now. It gives you max health, minor Aegis to reduce your damage taken from dungeon, trial, and arena monsters, max stamina, and whenever you taunt an enemy, you give you and your whole raid group minor courage for 15 seconds, increasing the weapon and spell damage by 215. So every 8 seconds, you can, for 15 seconds, give people in your group minor courage. So that means it lasts for 15 seconds, and you can it can occur every 8 seconds, so you can pretty much have a complete uptime on it there. And then the monster set for stamina groups will be Tremor Scale. This drops from Volenfell. It gives you an extra 1k max stamina, which is why our stamina pool is so high there. And when you activate a taunt ability on an enemy, you cause a Dune Ripper to burst from the ground beneath them after 1 second, dealing physical damage. And here's the important bit, reducing the physical resistance of the target or boss by 2311 for 8 seconds. So another debuff to the physical resistance. So your stamina DPS won't have to put a lot of CP into physical penetration. They can just go full on damage, and you make it easier for them with Alkosh, with your Crusher Glyph, with your Tremor Scale. Let's taunt this guy. You can see the Dune Ripper coming out here, and then he's afflicted with that, and his physical resistance is reduced by 2,300. So, this is the stamina setup. If you are in a magicka group these days, you do not need Alkosh, so you can use another set on the back bar. There are so many good sets that you could run, for example, the Akaviri Dragon Guard to reduce the cost of your ultimate abilities further, or you could run Powerful Assault, which we'll get into in a second. I'll quickly show you that. Or you could run Eben even on the Lightning Staff bar, or you could run something like Battalion Defender, so you heal your group a little bit. There are many great options. However, my preferred option would probably be Powerful Assault on the back bar, because it lines up so well with running the Master's Perfected Axe and Shield, because you only need Powerful Assault on your back bar. This will give you health, stamina, weapon damage, and when casting an assault ability, you and up to 5 group members within 10 meters gain 296 spell and weapon damage for 10 seconds. So you just go with the staff and the jewelry of Powerful Assault on your back bar. And then all you need to do, you already have your Warhorn, which is an assault ability. So all you need to do is go to the assault skill line and put either Caltrops, but this costs stamina. The only skill that costs magicka is Proximity Detonation, which is very nice. You just put this in place of Mass Hysteria, for example, or the Leash if you don't need it in content. And then every time you use that skill, for the next 10 seconds, your group will have the Powerful Assault weapon and spell damage buff. After 8 seconds, it blows up. Now it's about 10 seconds, just reapply it, and you can pretty much constantly give it to them. Since it costs magicka and your magicka regeneration is really high, you can pretty much keep that up at all times, unless you need to really block at the moment. And since you don't even need an enemy to cast it, you can even give your group that buff if you're a bit to the side or you're not really in the face of an enemy. So this is a very nice set for magicka DPS. Obviously, in magicka groups you would still run your Olnacrins, but you would change your monster set, because magicka groups do not need physical resistance reduction on a boss, because they're spell resistance, obviously. So choose any monster set you like. There is no real OP monster set at the moment in the game for tanks. You could run Earthgore for heals. You could run Malobeth the Scourgerer for a bit of heals and major vitality. You could even run Sentinel of Rakugams to summon that Dwemer Spider that will give your group magicka and stamina back if they have struggles with sustain. Or you could run Symphony of Blades unless one of your healers or the off-tank is already running it. You could run Stonekeepers for your own resistances. You could run Swarm Mothers to pull things in. You could run Engine Guardian for your own resistances, or Thorvakun for minor maim. It's in magicka groups, it's literally down to you, whatever you want to run. Just not Tremor Scale, because they don't need physical resistance reduction on bosses. The magicka groups don't. So the stamina setup would be Alkosh weapons, eventually Master's Perfected Axe and Shield if you can handle taking synergies only on your back bar, and Yolnacrin and Tremor Scale. And the magicka setup would be definitely masters Perfected Axe and Shield, because we only need Powerful Assault on our back bar. So Powerful Assault on the back bar, Yolnagrin on the body, and then any monster set you like that is not Tremor Scale. Okay, quickly going to the CP, then we're done with this video. It's a lengthy one, I know. 72 into Ironclad, 15 in Spell Shield, 49 in Hardy and Elemental Defender, and then 51 in Thick Skinned, 19 in Quick Recovery, and 15 in Heavy Armor Focus. I did put these 15 in Heavy Armor Focus and Spell Shield, since we're not a Nord, to buff our resistances for 1465. If you are fine with having less resistances, you can just go with leaving these points out. It will drop your resistances down to maybe 28.5k, but that should still be fine for all the content, really. This is just a bit for the safety, and then you could put them into Hardy, Elemental Defender, or Thick Skinned, or something like that. 40 in Warlord for the cost of break free, 16 in Bashing Focus for reducing the cost of bash, 56 in Tenacity to get more stamina back if you do heavy attack if you need to, and then 64 in Arcanist for increased magicka recovery, 66 in Shadow Ward for block cost reduction, and then 20 in Tumbling for cost of roll dodge reduction, 64 in Blessed, 31 in Elfborn for increased healing and critical healing that we do ourselves, and then 52 in Master at Arms, 64 in Mighty, and 59 in Piercing. So these three values, Mighty, Piercing, and Master at Arms, are only there because of Alkush. That's what you need to make Alkush work and make the best of it. So if you decide not to run Alkush because you don't even have the set, or you just don't give a shit, you don't need these in here. You can just put them all into Thaumaturge and Precise Strikes, maybe. Anything really. The only thing that would be good is to get 120 points in total in here, so you can get the Last Stand passive. So if your health falls below 20%, you gain Major Heroism, which grants you a lot of ultimate. Alright, so much for that. I hope that was informative, even though it was a quite long video. I hope you enjoy Nightblade tanking. As I said, it's my main tank pretty much in the game. I do love Nightblade tanking. Let me know what you think about it, and I'll see you next time.